Welcome to the bonus options section of the Golden Garrisons. Now, these are just a series of things that I've gained over the years that I've learned how to use that have made my gaming process a lot easier. And some of them I've touched on in the previous sections, and some of them are going to be new. Now, the most obvious thing that makes the gaming easier is the ability to fly. And, well, Blizzard kind of waffled back and forth on that in Draenor. But eventually they'd allowed us to get and use our flying mounts in the air. And, well, it took long enough, but they did it, so we can take advantage of that. In order to get flight, you need to complete an achievement. It's not like any of the previous expansions. You don't spend gold on it, you don't look anything up, you just do the meta achievement, and then all of a sudden all of your characters can fly in Draenor. And that achievement is called Draenor Pathfinding. It's way too long to go into in this detail, in this particular section, so I'm just going to give you a link to what I used to get to it. Now, if you're looking for information on it, go to www.wowhead.com, and then once you're there, you search for Draenor Pathfinding Guide. And it will walk you through step by step. Wowhead has been an excellent resource for me over the years. They're generally very reliable and helpful. Anyway, another thing, as you can notice, some of you probably already know this already, but I have multiple action bars instead of just the original two. And that's a very easy thing that Blizzard included in their game, and I'll just show you that real quick. Go to Interface, Action Bars, and then add them all. Bottom left, bottom right, right bar 2. You can choose to lock them if you want. That just makes it easier for you to not mess things up in the middle of a combat situation. And I simply set it up to the Shift key. If I click on something and drag it, nothing happens. But if I hold down Shift and click and drag it, I can move it around. The action bars themselves, as you can see, I use almost all of them, and the ones on the lower tab as well. Key binding is a natural follow-up to that. As you can see, some of my action bars have letters or dashes or comments on them, in addition to the macros that I use. And that's just so that I can access them without having to click on them using the mouse. And that's pretty simple as well. Key bindings, and then go to multi-action bar section, and you can look through them all. I, for example, use a mouse key to mount up, and a mouse key to use the salvage macro. I set it to the middle mouse, so whenever I press the middle mouse button, it tries to salvage something. So rather than clicking on it, I can simply talk to Lumba, and then middle click the mouse button, and it starts salvaging. Cool. Anyway, once the key binding is set up, you also need the macros. Now, I touched on the macros earlier, but I use them all over the place. I'm the kind of person who will most likely not use something unless I remember to use it, and I most likely won't remember to use it unless it's already on a macro. So, for example, my Crusader Strike for my Paladin isn't just a Crusader Strike. I set up a macro for my Paladin so that Crusader Strike also does all of this as well. It casts all of these secondary buffs, because otherwise I would certainly forget to use them. And it uses my Kapha Press, which is an item I picked up in the previous expansion. The Kapha Press is here. There. I'm a sucker for items that you don't need to equip, but still benefit you. But that's just one of the many macros I use, and some of the macros I use are actually meant to be used on all of my characters, because I spend a lot of time in trade chat talking to people, and I use those macros to do broadcasts. But I set up not just the Crusader Strike, but Hammer of the Righteous for the same thing, but just attacking multiple targets, and instead of Templar's Verdict, Divine Storm, exactly the same thing, just attacking multiple targets. I use equipment slots to set up and equip my stuff. I can switch between a town gear, which is, as you can see, is pretty simple, and the standard Ret gear, just with the click of a button. Very useful. Unfortunately, my health dies in the process, but it heals. I use a macro to use all of the secondary items as well. I even use a macro to put on my cooking hat and set up a pet that functions as a furnace, as a stove at the same time. Of course, I then want to get rid of that because he doesn't really help in any other way. And finally, the add-ons. Whew. Okay, I used to think that add-ons were nothing but poison to computers. I used to think that they were a platform by which people could download viruses, and they might actually still be. But I did notice when playing Warlords of Draenor that I kind of needed them. Without them, things take way, way too long. So I use 2 of them pretty much exclusively. And the first one I already touched on at the beginning of this series is called Master Plan, and a lot of people use that add-on. It's found at this site, mods.curse.com, add-ons WoW. Now Curse Gaming, the site, provides a lot of add-ons and other things for a lot of different sites, but it's a very good resource for people who want to download and use add-ons. I wouldn't recommend using their client though, because it doesn't update as fast as the add-ons themselves. So just go to modscurse.com, find the Master Plan add-on, it should be at the top of the list, and download it. Now, the tricky thing about add-ons is that they need to be in exactly the right place in order to work. So find whichever folder you used to install WoW, and then find the add-ons folder that's just one subsection down below, and put all of the add-ons that you download in there, and then they should be functional. Or at least they should be available. Once they're in the same folder, the folder named add-ons, you can access them in-game. And there's actually an add-ons tab that they added relatively recently. As you can see, I just use Master Plan and Cellomatic. Cellomatic is the other one I downloaded, and as I described earlier, it allows you to automatically vendor any trash that you pick up, and in my case, any greens that I pick up as well, because it's actually easier to just vendor them than to actually disenchant them or try and sell them on the auction house. Cellomatic it's relatively new. I'm not entirely sure how much I feel about it, but it has been useful so far. It just needs some tweaking, that's all. And finally, I have been obsessed with followers ever since I first got the Garrison. My intention is to get a Garrison that has every follower. I know that will take years, probably more, but I'm willing to deal with it. It's easy to get them now. And once you get all of the followers that are available on the standard, the original, 30, maybe 35 of them that you can get out in the world, the only way you can get followers after that is to hire them using the Headhunter. But there are some followers that are special, Garona being the most obvious example of that. Getting her, well, to call it a pain would be an understatement. She's a nightmare to get. She's part of the Legendary Ring quest, but in order to get her you need tons of Apexis crystals. You need to go through multiple heroic dungeons. You need to go into 2 different raids multiple times each. It's a long and involved process. But her ability, Master Assassin, basically makes her able to carry entire groups on her back without any difficulty whatsoever. She's the definition of badass. In addition, I'm a lore nut, and she's been around since Warcraft 1. I remember rescuing her in a mission in Warcraft 1, so I kind of geeked out about it when I found out she was in the game. But the other special ones, the other ones with unique traits that can't be removed or re-rolled, well, let's see. Just below Garona under power is Oronok. And Oronok's a lot easier to get. Where are you? There you are. You have to do a series of quests in Tanaan to get access to him. But Garona's ability, Master Assassin, completely counters one threat. Oronok's Demonic Knowledge counters 2/3 of a threat, so he's less powerful, but he's still very useful. And in the same vein is Bluke. I like Bluke. He's very simple. All you have to do is find him and beat him up, and he joins your group. It's pretty hilarious. But his trait, Combat Experience, counters 1/3 of any threat. So Garona, Oronok, and Bluke are the skeleton keys. They fit any lock, really. There are the bodyguards, 5 of them. They're pretty easy to get for the most part. Well, except for the Talon Priest Ishal. You have to do a bunch of quests to get him. And then there's Harrison. I described him in detail in a previous section. There is Nat, who I have yet to get. I don't have the patience for fishing, and until I get a lot of free time, I'm not actually going to go for Nat. But once I do get him, I can use him as a vendor, once I've assigned him to a fishing shack. And there are a few others here and there between. Solar Priest Vakes, he's interesting. His special ability is that he's the only follower in the game who can increase how many Apexis crystals you can get. So, I have a very specific setup for Vakes. He has to have the following abilities. He has to be able to counter deadly minions with Polymorph. He has to be able to counter powerful spell with Counterspell. He already has Apexis Attenuation, that's a guarantee. And he has to have high stamina, which allows him to get 1/3 bonus on long missions. All Apexis missions are long missions. And finally, I used the Ogre Buddy Handbook to give him Ogre Buddy, so that he would pair well with Blook. Blook and Vakes, assuming they have the exact right setup, can counter any Apexis mission without difficulty. Unfortunately, Blook's abilities aren't set up on this character. I haven't been able to reroll him properly. In order to perfectly counter all Apexis missions with Vakes, he's got Heroic Leap, and that's a good one for him. But he needs, instead of Recklessness, he needs Shield Wall, which counters Massive Strike. And instead, he gets combat experience for free, no problem there. But he needs to have high stamina as well. And then once he gets high stamina, I will put a Guide to Arakoa Relations on the other one, so that he works well with Vakes. The two of them can then do every Apexis mission 100% and get double the resources every single time. It's a pain to get, but it's well worth it in my opinion, especially if I plan on doing missions indefinitely. Whew, okay. There are a few others out there. Bodyguards. Ariok. He's hard to get. You need to go into Hellfire Citadel on normal difficulty or harder, so looking for raid doesn't help. And you need to beat Kilrog, one of the bosses, within a certain amount of time. And Ariok is basically like Garona, but only when he's alone. So he's a skeleton key for one-man missions. Unfortunately, that's not particularly useful, but he does look cool, you have to admit. I mean, seriously. That particular model, I've always been a fan of that. In addition, there's Phylark and Palas, but we'll get into him later. Phylark is one of the few followers in this game that doesn't have a race. There is no way to use an item to increase your mission chance while you're with him. Which I suppose makes sense. I mean, what are they going to do? Create a new item called Botane? Who knows? But his ability, Evergreen, only works when he's assigned to the Lumberyard. Now, I didn't do the Lumberyard because I'm lazy and I don't like to spend that much time getting garrison resources. Instead, I'd rather use the trade post and get them a little bit less efficiently, but a lot easier. But his Evergreen ability does counter swamps, so I guess that's something. Same for Nat's fishing ability. Palas is hard to understand. His Apexis Predator counters any kind of creature in the mission, but it doesn't counter it very effectively. He's basically between Blook and Oronok when it comes to sheer power. And not all missions have something to counter, so he might be less effective than that in some missions. But anyway, that's pretty much it for all the special followers. The bodyguards themselves, their special bodyguard ability doesn't have any effect on missions whatsoever. Alright. That's pretty much it for my Golden Garrison series. I really hope it's been helpful to all of you. And if you have any questions, just either contact me in-game, whisper me while I'm on the server, every night at 10 to 11 p.m. server time, or you can send me a letter if I'm not online, or you can contact the website that this is hosted on. At any rate, have a great day. Bye.